At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. After all, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Larissa. Let's begin. The staircase seemed to stretch forever, each step carved from the same dark purple stone that made up the portal chamber below. Frairen's paws moved carefully, her XC-1 Lancer held at low ready as she climbed. Behind her, she could hear Zetrin's breathing, steady but a bit labored from carrying both his flamethrower and the precious FTL beacon strapped to his chest. Himmel brought up the rear, his small point frame making surprisingly little noises despite the weight of his grenade launcher. Her ears swiveled constantly, tracking every sound, the scrape of claws on stone, the constant hiss of Zetrin's respirator, the whine of the beacon's active transmission. Nothing else, no voices, no footsteps, no alarm bells. Either they'd gotten incredibly lucky, or the Mandarin hadn't yet realized their portal operators were dead. Frairen's mind kept circling back to Ramira. Her little sister was safe, probably on the station, waiting for the all-clear. But Frairen was here, on an alien world, cut off. She'd spent days worrying about Ramira's safety, and now she was the one who might never make it home. Focus. She forced the thought away. Soldiers didn't survive by dwelling on what-ifs. The staircase finally ended, opening into what Frairen could only describe as a temple. Her breath slowed. The space was massive, the ceiling soaring at least 30 feet overhead, supported by columns of the same purple stone. Tall, narrow windows lined the upper walls, allowing shafts of dim amber light to cut through the darkness. Hard to tell whether it was sunlight or some other feature of this alien world.
"Stars above,"
Zetrin hissed quietly as he emerged behind her, his hood flaring before he forced it flat again.
"What is this place?"
"Temple," Himmel whispered, his orange eyes wide as he scanned the space. "Has to be. Look at the carvings. Religious iconography, maybe? Or..." He trailed off, his usual sarcasm subdued by genuine unease. Frairen's tactical mind was already working. The space was too open, too exposed. If someone came through those far doors, she could see at least 3 archways leading deeper into the structure. They'd be caught in a kill box. No cover except the columns, and those were spaced too far apart to provide effective concealment. But it was the insects that really bothered her. She hadn't noticed them while thinking of her sister, but now she saw them. They crawled along the walls, the columns, even across the floor. Each was roughly the size of her paw, with 6 legs and a segmented body that looked almost crystalline. Actual crystals protruded from their backs, fused to their bodies as if grown rather than attached. They were everywhere, following patterns she couldn't decipher, alien in a way that caused nausea.
"Are those things alive?"
Zetrin's tongue flicked out, tasting the air.
"They smell wrong, like metal and something organic I don't recognize."
"Don't touch them," Frairen ordered quietly, watching one of the creatures scuttle across a nearby column. "We don't know if they're dangerous, or if they will raise an alarm, or..." A skittering sound behind them made all 3 of them spin, weapons coming up. Makia, Vartal, and Trimmy emerged from the staircase, looking like they'd just climbed out of hell itself. Their pink and white fur was matted with sweat inside their helmets, their rifles held in shaking paws. Makia's eyes were wide, her ears flat against her helmet. The 2 males looked barely better. Vartal's tail tucked between his legs. Trimmy's jaw clenched so tight Frairen could see the muscles working even through his armor. Right. The recruits. She'd almost forgotten about them in the span of climbing the stairs and assessing the temple. That was bad. A sergeant didn't forget her troops, even during suicide missions and alien planets. "Stay close," Frairen whispered, gesturing them forward with one paw. "Stay quiet, and whatever you do, don't..." One of the insects dropped from the ceiling directly onto Makia's helmet. The young Yorpal's scream was pure instinct, high-pitched and terrified, Her rifle came up, finger already on the trigger. The XC-1 Lancer barked 3 times, the sound impossibly loud in the temple's acoustics, echoing off stone and columns like thunder. The bullets punched into the ceiling, sending chips of purple stone raining down as the insect tumbled off her helmet and hit the floor with a wet crunch. "No!" Frairen started to shout, but it was too late. Meikia was still screaming, still firing, her rifle tracking the insect as it writhed on the ground. Vartal and Trimmy rushed to her side, their training kicking in even through their panic. Vartal brought his boot down on the creature, crushing it with a sickening crack. Trimmy smashed the butt of his rifle into the remains again and again, pulverizing the palm-sized thing into paste and shattered crystal fragments. The main trio stood frozen, watching in absolute horror as their carefully maintained stealth evaporated in the span of 3 seconds. "Well," Himmel said quietly, "we're completely fucked now." Zetran's hood flared fully, his tongue flicking rapidly.
They know we're here. They have to know. That was loud enough to wake the entire planet.
Frairen's mind raced. Every second they stood here was a second wasted. The gunfire would bring Mandarin running. They needed to move, now. But where? Deeper into the temple? Back down the stairs? Neither option was good, but standing still was suicide. "Follow me," she snarled, her sergeant voice cutting through the panic. "Now! Move!" She sprinted toward the nearest archway, her paws pounding against stone. Behind her, she could hear the others scrambling to follow. The recruits panicked, breathing loud in her ears over the comms. The archway led to a corridor, narrower than the temple, but still uncomfortably wide. More of those insects crawled along the walls, and they were moving faster now, like they were responding to the disturbance. A doorway, small, set into the left wall. Frairen didn't hesitate. She yanked it open and dove inside, her rifle sweeping the darkness. Storage room. Thank the stars. Shelves lined with walls stacked with things. Crystalline containers, metal tools she didn't recognize, cloth that might have been religious vestments, or might have been something else entirely. The room was alien, but it had one critical advantage. It was dark, and it was out of sight. In! She said, gesturing frantically. Himmel and Zetran piled through the doorway, followed by the 3 recruits. Frairen pulled the door mostly closed, leaving just a crack to see through. Not a moment too soon. Footsteps, heavy, multiple sets. Frairen pressed her eye to the crack and felt her blood turn to ice. Mandarin soldiers, a full squad, at least 8 of them, moving in formation down the corridor with weapons ready. Their red eyes scanned the shadows, their dark skin almost blending with the purple stone. And behind them, something worse. The champion was massive, easily 3 meters tall, its body a grotesque fusion of the Mandarin form and something else, something that had been grafted onto it. Its arms were too long, ending in claws that looked like they could tear through armor. Its chest had been split open and reconfigured, revealing what looked like crystalline ribs. Frairen had seen a champion before, on the station, the thing that had nearly killed her and her team, that had killed so many others. But seeing one here, in its element, surrounded by its creators, terrifying didn't even begin to cover it. The creature's head swiveled as it walked, nostrils flaring. Could it smell them? Track them by scent? Frairen held her breath, willing her heart to stop pounding so loudly, certain that the thing could hear it through the door. The Mandarin squad paused near their hiding spot. One of them said something in their language, harsh syllables that sounded like broken glass. Another responded, gesturing back toward the temple. They were discussing the gunfire. Of course they were. The champion's head turned toward the storage room. Frairen's paw tightened on her rifle, fingers sliding onto the trigger. If it opened that door, she'd fire. Spray the entire corridor, take as many of them down as she could before they overwhelmed her position. At least the recruits might have a chance to run. The champion's gaze drifted past the door, kept moving, didn't pause, didn't linger. It hadn't seen them, or hadn't cared, or couldn't detect them through the door. The squad moved on, their footsteps fading down the corridor. The champion followed, its massive form disappearing into the darkness. Frairen waited, counted to 60, then to 100. Still nothing. She turned to face the others crammed into the storage room. In the dim light filtering through the crack, she could see Makia's face, tear-streaked and terrified. Vardal and Trimmy looked like they might be sick. Himmel's usual cocky expression was gone, replaced by something harder. Zetran's hood was still flared, his clawed hands gripping his flamethrower like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. And the beacon, still strapped to Zetran's chest, still transmitting their position back to Earth. Still, their only hope.
Zetran,
Frairen whispered, reaching for the beacon straps.
Give it to them. What?
The Karlaken's hood flattened in confusion.
Frairen, this is our only...
I know what it is. She worked the straps loose, her paws steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Which is exactly why the recruits need to hold on to it. You, me, and Himmel. We're going out there.
That's suicide!
Himmel hissed, his orange eyes wide.
Did you see that thing? Did you see how many soldiers there were? We can't fight that. We're 3 people with sidearms, a flamethrower, and a grenade launcher. This isn't the station where we had backup and...
We're not fighting them. Frairen interrupted, pressing the beacon into Makia's shaking paws. The young Yorpal looked at it like it was a live bomb.
We're distracting them.
Zetran's hood flared again, fully this time.
Frairen, please, think about this. We don't know this planet. We don't know how many Mandarin are out there. We don't know where we are or how long it will take for the big mouth bass to arrive. Sending the beacon deeper while we draw attention is
the only option that makes sense. Frairen cut him off, her voice harder now. She turned to face both of them fully, her pink eyes intense. Think about it. The Mandarin are going to figure out we killed their portal operators. They probably already have. They're going to search this entire structure, and when they do, they'll find us, all of us, together. She gestured to the beacon and Makia's paws. But if we split up, if the 3 of us go out there and start raising hell, draw their attention, make them think we're the entire team, they'll focus on us, they'll chase us, and while they're doing that, the recruits can take the beacon deeper into the storage room, hide, and keep that signal transmitting until humanity arrives.
We'll die,
Himmel said flatly.
You know that, right? 3 of us against however many Mandarin are in this place, plus that nightmare champion. We'll die, Frairen.
Maybe, Frairen admitted. She met his eyes, then Zetran's. But that beacon, that represents our only chance of survival. If they can't track that signal, then we're already dead. The station's dead. Every world the Mandarin attack next is dead. So yes, we're going to go out there and cause chaos. We're going to make ourselves the biggest, loudest, most obvious target we can be, and we're going to trust that these 3, she gestured to the recruits, can keep that beacon safe long enough for the rescue to arrive. Zetran's hood slowly flattened. Himmel's jaw worked, like he was chewing on the logic and finding he couldn't argue with it. Frairen turned to face the 3 recruits. Makia was still crying, silent tears running down her furred cheeks. Vardal and Trimmy looked like they'd aged a decade in the last 5 minutes.
Listen to me,
Frairen said, her voice soft but firm. You're going to take that beacon and go as deep into this storage room as you can. Stack supplies, hide yourselves. Don't make a sound. Don't move unless you absolutely have to, and whatever happens out there, whatever you hear. She paused, making sure they were looking at her. You defend that beacon with your lives. Understand? That signal is the only thing standing between all of us and dying alone on enemy territory. So you protect it, you keep transmitting, and you survive until the big mouth bass arrives. Mekia's voice was weak.
Sergeant, we can't. What if we...
You will, Frairen said firmly. Because your first response. Because you've trained for worse than this. Because I believe you can. Now move. Deeper. Go! The 3 recruits scrambled toward the back of the storage room, the beacon's white light pulsing steadily in Makia's trembling paws. Frairen looked at Himmel and Zetran. Ready to make some noise? Himmel checked his grenade launcher, his expression settling into something grimly determined. I hate when you're right, you know that? I know, Frairen said. She reached for the door handle. Let's go wake up this whole damn planet. 5 hours later, Miss Rimiki stood on Earth, watching history be made. The facility was one of humanity's most secure military installations, buried deep within what the humans called the Rocky Mountains. The main chamber had been converted into an impromptu signing room, with a massive table at its center where the documents lay waiting. Council member Tashara sat quietly. Beside her, council leader Varko's massive frame dwarfed his chair, his 4 eyes fixed on the papers before him, as if they might bite. The white-furred Yorpal elder, Miss Rimiki, still didn't know his actual name, only that he'd been one of the loudest voices against corporation, sat rigidly, his tail tucked beneath his seat. Agent Smith stood nearby, his expression neutral, though Miss Rimiki caught the faint hint of satisfaction in his eyes. In the background, visible through reinforced glass walls, the champion was being moved. The creature thrashed against its restraints, massive and terrible even in captivity. It took 12 humans in powered exoskeletons to maneuver the transport cage, the metal groaning under the champion's struggles. Orange-gray fluid dripped from where harpoon cables still pierced its flesh, keeping its stolen limbs pinned. The Yorpal arm grafted onto its torso, flexed and clawed at nothing, while the Zumra head fronds, lifeless but still attached, swayed with each violent movement. Its 4 eyes blazed as it was hauled toward whatever containment facility humanity had prepared. Miss Rimiki watched Council Member Tashara's fronds ripple in disgust as she signed the cooperation agreement. The Zumra leader's hand trembled as she set down the data stylus. Remarkable, Agent Smith said, moving to stand beside Miss Rimiki. His voice was pitched low enough that only she could hear. 5 hours ago, they were lecturing us about cultural contamination and questioning whether the champions were even real. Now they can't sign fast enough. Miss Rimiki's tail swished once. Fear is an excellent motivator. Watching that thing tear through their body cards probably helped. Seeing one of their own species turned into spare parts certainly made an impression. Smith agreed. He glanced at her, and for a moment, his professional mask slipped, showing genuine warmth. This is your doing, you know. If you hadn't convinced them to come to Earth, if you hadn't set the stage for this. He gestured to the signing table. We'd still be fighting bureaucratic inertia while the Mandarin picked off our stations one by one. Miss Rimiki felt her fronds flatten slightly in discomfort. Praise always made her uneasy. I just played my part. You were the one who arranged the demonstration. A demonstration that wouldn't have mattered if they weren't here to see it. Smith's expression shifted, becoming more serious. How's your human holding up? Caden, right? He's safe. Confused about why I disappeared in the middle of the night cycle, but safe. Miss Rimiki paused, then asked the question that had been gnawing at her since she'd arrived. What about Frairen? Is there any update? Smith's jaw tightened, and Miss Rimiki felt her chest constrict at the expression. The situation is the same, he said carefully. The big-mouthed bass is tracking the beacon signal. Third company is loaded and ready for deployment. The moment they reach the planet, they're going to drop heavy, and I mean everything. Every pod, every yak, every bomb, full air support, armor, artillery, the works. That sounds like overkill for a rescue operation, Miss Rimiki said, though she understood the subtext immediately. It's not just a rescue. Smith's voice hardened. It's revenge. For the station. For the civilians they killed. For every champion they've created. By butchering our people and yours. We are going to land on that world, and our fighters are going to make the Mandarin regret every portal they ever opened. Miss Rimiki's fronds pressed flat against her skull. But Frairen and the others. Do they have a chance? Smith was quiet for a moment too long. When he finally spoke, his voice belonged to someone who'd sent too many soldiers into situations they might not return from. The beacon is still transmitting. That means someone is alive to protect it, whether it's all of them or just one. He trailed off, then shook his head. Frairen's tough. Best NCO in her company. Maybe in the whole third. If anyone can survive being stranded on a hostile alien homeworld with limited ammunition and a handful of recruits, it's her. That wasn't an answer. That was hope dressed up in tactical assessment. Miss Rimiki stared through the glass at the struggling champion. Her mind kept circling back to the same impossible question. How was that beacon still active? The plan had been for a full tactical team to go through the portal. Instead, the portal had collapsed early, trapping only a handful of soldiers on the other side. A Yorpal sergeant, 2 experienced NCOs, and 3 fresh recruits against an entire planet of Mandarin. The odds were...
Miss Rimiki.
She turned to find the white-furred Yorpal elder approaching, his posture formal, his ears forward. Agent Smith straightened beside her, and the 2 of them exchanged a quick glance. This was unexpected.
Elder,
Miss Rimiki said carefully, inclining her head in the minimum gesture of respect. The Yorpal's eyes flicked to Smith, then back to Miss Rimiki.
I wished to inquire about the Yorpal who went through the portal, Sergeant Frairen and the 3 recruits.
His voice was stiff, formal, but there was something underneath it, something that might have been concern.
What is their status?
Smith answered before Miss Rimiki could. They're alive, as of the last transmission. The beacon they're protecting is still broadcasting, which means someone is defending it.
And their chances of survival until rescue arrives?
Smith's expression didn't change, but Miss Rimiki saw the calculation in his eyes. He could lie, offer false comfort. But that wasn't the human way, especially not with Smith. Honestly, Elder, low. Very low. They're outnumbered, outgunned, on hostile terrain with limited supplies and no reinforcement. The only thing keeping them alive right now is their training, their equipment, and sheer stubborn refusal to die. He paused. But Frairen is exceptional. If she survives this, she'll be a war hero. The kind of soldier that gets written about in military history texts. She's probably looking at the next 2 or 3 promotions in record time, maybe even a commission if she wants it. The Elder's ears went rigid.
And the recruits?
If they make it back, they'll be heroes too, Smith said. Youngest soldiers ever to conduct a successful deep reconnaissance operation on an enemy home world. That kind of action gets medals, gets respect. The Elder was quiet for a long moment, his tail finally uncurling from beneath his seat. When he spoke, his voice was softer, less formal.
If they arrive, I will ensure that no other elders interfere with their service. The ones who joined humanity to train on Earth, the ones we call...
He paused, as if the word itself pained him.
HFY. I will advocate for them, protect them from the Council's censure.
Miss Rimiki's fronds lifted in surprise. That was more than she'd expected. More than she dared hope for.
Thank you, Elder,
she said, and meant it. The Yorpal nodded once, stiffly, then turned and walked back to the signing table where Council Leader Varco was waiting. Smith watched him go, then muttered under his breath. 5 hours ago, he was calling Frairen a disgrace to her species. Now he's promising to protect her. Fear and gratitude. Hell of a combination. Miss Rimiki managed a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Inside, her mind was still churning, still worrying. The beacon was still transmitting. Frairen was still alive. But for how much longer? What in all the stars was happening on the Mandarin home world? Frairen's lungs burned. Every breath felt like she was swallowing broken glass. Her legs pumped in another desperate burst as she sprinted across the temple's grand corridor, boots pounding against stone. Behind her, the champion's roar shook dust from the ceiling. She dove behind one of the massive pillars, her shoulder slamming into the stone hard enough to rattle her teeth. Her XC-1 Lancer came up immediately, barrel tracking back toward where Himmel and Zetran were retreating. The duo was maybe 30 meters behind her position, still engaged, still firing, and still way too close to that abomination. The champion charged them like a freight train, made of grafted flesh and crystalline bone, 3 meters tall, all stolen parts and impossible biology. Zetran squeezed the flamethrower's trigger, and fire roared. The champion's stolen Zumra fronds ignited like kindling, blackening and curling. Still, the creature didn't stop. It never stopped. But as the fronds burned, the pressure in their mind eased. The source of the mental attacks scourged away, if only until the creature regenerated them. That lesson had been learned the hard way on the station. Frairen braced against the pillar and fired. 3 round bursts, center mass, the bullets punched into the champion's crystalline ribs, and orange-gray fluid sprayed. The thing staggered, just a little.
Frairen!
Himmel's voice crackled through her helmet comms, high-pitched with adrenaline.
I just want to say for the record that shooting those giant insect cocoon things might not have been my wisest tactical decision. You think?
Zetran's hiss came next, his flamethrower still spewing flames at the champion's regenerating fronds.
You blew up their champion nursery. Of course they're angry.
Frairen's mind flashed back to the chamber they'd stumbled into an hour ago, maybe 2 hours. Time had become meaningless, just running, fighting, surviving. The chamber had been filled with massive spider-like insects, their abdomens swollen and white, translucent enough to see the faces pressed against the membrane from inside. Dozens of them, all gestating new champions. And Himmel, stars bless his trigger-happy little poit soul, had lobbed 3 40mm grenades into the center of the room before anyone could stop him. The explosion had been spectacular, cocoons rupturing, half-formed champions spilling onto the floor in wet, twitching heaps, and the Mandarin priests in the chamber, actual religious zealots in ceremonial robes, had dropped to their knees immediately, prostrating themselves, wailing prayers to their god while the room burned around them. They hadn't fought, hadn't raised weapons, just knelt there, crying and praying, even as the ceiling collapsed and fire spread. But the priestess, the one Frairen recognized from the reports of Miss Rimiki's stolen memories, the one with the grafted Zumra fronds and the glowing staff, Zumir had gone absolutely berserk. Frairen fired again. The champion was closing the gap on Himmel and Zetran, its massive frame eating up distance with each stride. The duo was backing up, still firing, still trying to keep those fronds burned away. But the regeneration was faster now, angrier.
Himmel, hit it with incendiary!
Frairen barked into the comms.
I'm out!
Himmel's voice came back strained.
Use the last one on that hallway full of regular Mandarin, remember? The ones who were very politely trying to stab us to death? Then use high explosive and aim for their legs,
Zetran hissed, his flamethrower sputtering, low on fuel. Stars, they were running on fumes now. The champion's fronds were halfway regrown already, writhing like serpents. Frairen could feel it building, that pressure in her skull that meant a mental attack was coming. She braced herself, gritting her teeth. Pain. Not physical, mental. A vision slammed into Frairen's mind with the force of a freight train. Ramira, her little sister, lying on the classroom floor, throat torn open, pink fur matted with blood. Those big, innocent eyes staring at nothing. Dead. Gone. Killed while Frairen was galaxies away, too far to protect her, too slow to save her. No, this wasn't the champion. The attack pattern was different, more focused, more personal. Frairen's eyes snapped to the corridor. There, behind the champion's massive bulk, partially obscured by its body, Zumir, the priestess. Staff raised, the crystal at its tip blazing orange, her stolen Zumra fronds spread like wings. The closer she got, the stronger the illusion became. Frairen shook her head violently, forcing the vision away. Ramira was alive, safe on the station. This was just mental manipulation, just tricks, just...
Frairen!
Himmel's voice cut through the fog.
Frairen, snap out of it, we need to move!
She blinked. Himmel and Zetrin were right beside her now, both of them breathing hard. Both looked as exhausted as she felt. Hours of fighting, hours of running, hours of using the champion's own berserk charges to demolish entire sections of the temple when it missed them and crashed through the walls instead. The champion was 30 meters out and closing. Zumir behind it, staff still glowing. That insane smile plastered across her dark face.
We need to retreat,
Zetrin hissed, his hood fully flared.
We can't win this in open combat, not with her amping up the champion and throwing illusions at us.
Agreed. Himmel panted, checking his grenade launcher. I've got maybe 4 rounds left. 4. After that, I'm throwing rocks. Frairen's mind raced. They couldn't keep doing this. Couldn't keep running through the endless corridors, firing, falling back, burning through ammunition they didn't have. The champion was too strong. Zamir's illusions were too effective, and they were all dead on their feet. Her eyes tracked across the corridor. There, a circular staircase, narrow and winding, leading up into what looked like a tower, the kind of space where a 3-meter-tall abomination couldn't maneuver effectively. There! Frairen said, pointing with her rifle. We take it to close quarters. Both Himmel and Zetrin's heads whipped toward her.
That's insane,
Zetrin said flatly.
Balls deep insane,
Himmel agreed, his orange eyes wide. Frairen, that thing will tear us apart in close quarters. We need our rifles. We need distance. We need our slammers. Frairen interrupted, her paw dropping to the power warhammer at her belt. In that staircase, it can't swing those long arms, can't use its size advantage, and Zumir can't hide behind it anymore. She fired another burst at the charging champion. The rounds sparked off its crystalline ribs, 20 meters now. We can't last much longer out here, Frairen continued, her voice hard. We're almost out of ammunition, almost out of fuel for the flamethrower, almost out of time. Our only hope is that humanity arrives soon. She squeezed off another burst, 15 meters. Or we kill that priestess and hope the champion goes feral without her guidance.
And you think trapping ourselves in a narrow staircase is the best plan?
Zetrin's hood was vibrating with stress. I think it's our only plan. Frairen snapped back. 10 meters. The champion's fronds were fully regrown now, writhing. She could feel the mental pressure building again. Another illusion coming. That thing is too strong in open spaces, but in tight quarters, perhaps we have a chance. She didn't wait for them to agree, couldn't afford to. The champion was 5 meters out, its grafted Yorpal arm reaching for Zetrin's throat. Move! Frairen roared, spinning and sprinting for the staircase. Behind her, she heard Himmel's exasperated curse.
I hate it when she's right. Stars above, we're going to die.
Zetrin hissed, but his boots were already pounding stone, following her lead. The 3 of them hit the staircase entrance together, a tangle of limbs and weapons. The space immediately narrowed, the walls closing in, the ceiling dropping low. Frairen took the steps 2 at a time, her slammer coming free from her belt. Behind them, the champion's roar shook the entire tower. It was coming, and they were going to meet it with warhammers and whatever scraps of courage they had left. Specialist Rayburn stood on the bridge of the Big Mouth Bass, barely registering the view through the massive viewport before her. The Mandarin homeworld hung in the void like a bruised fruit, swirls of yellow, atmosphere bleeding into patches of sickly green landmass. Alien, wrong, beautiful in the way a predator was beautiful. She didn't care about the scenery. Captain Shaughness? Rayburn's voice came out tighter than she intended, her hands gripping the railing near the tactical display. How long until the yaks reach the surface? Captain Shaughness stood ramrod straight near the command chair, his posture as rigid as always. He didn't turn to face her, just gestured with one hand toward a flat screen display embedded in the tactical console. Look there, Specialist. Rayburn's eyes snapped to the screen. Hundreds of dots streamed away from the Big Mouth Bass in glittering arcs, drop pods screaming toward the planet below. Yaks leading the charge, their smaller profiles darting ahead of the bulkier Higgins 3s. The deployment counter in the corner read Active Drop, 847 pods launched. They're dropping right now. Shauna said, his voice calm, even when the world was burning. Air support will follow in 30 seconds, fighters, bombers, everything. Missiles are already being programmed for high-value targets identified by the beacon signal triangulation. Rayburn's jaw clenched. Frairen was down there, had been down there for hours, surviving by sheer stubborn Yorpal refusal to die. And in the next 5 minutes, Shauna's continued, finally turning to meet her eyes. Earth will finally ensure that no other portal ever opens on our soil again. The sharpness in his voice made it clear this wasn't just a rescue operation. This was retribution, payback for Earth's invasion. The civilians killed for every champion created from stolen flesh. Humanity was about to make the Mandarin homeworld burn. But Rayburn couldn't focus on that, couldn't focus on revenge or justice or whatever the hell Command wanted to call it. Her mind was stuck on one thought, looping endlessly. Frairen. Frairen trapped on an alien world. Frairen fighting for her life. Isn't there anything? Rayburn's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. She swallowed hard, forced the words out steadier. Isn't there anything we can do to be faster? To get them faster? Shaunas looked at her for a long moment, something almost like sympathy crossing his weathered features. Then he raised his hand and pointed, not at the viewport, not at the tactical display, but at the bridge crew around them. Rayburn followed his gesture. A Yorpal communications officer was coordinating drop vectors with her human counterpart. A Carlacan navigator had his hood partially flared as he worked, the sensor array calling out terrain data to the drop coordinators. A point engineer was frantically rerouting power to ensure the launch rails could maintain their firing rate. Humans, Star citizens, all of them working in perfect synchronization. Everyone here, Shauna said quietly, is doing their absolute best. Every officer, every specialist, every technician and pilot and gunner on this ship. His voice traveled across the bridge, and Rayburn saw several heads turn, listening even as they worked. We're moving as fast as physics and human ingenuity allow, faster than any military in the galaxy has ever deployed a combat force. And we will not stop until we bring our people home. Rayburn stared at the crew. She could see it in their faces, the same worry she felt, the same determination. The Yorpal communications officer's ears were pinned back in stress. The Carlacan's claws were trembling slightly as he worked his console. They all knew someone down there, friends, battle buddies, people who'd shared meals and jokes and training exercises. Specialist, Shauna said, pulling her attention back to him. His expression had shifted, becoming something harder, more certain. That beacon is still transmitting, right now, this very second, which means someone down there is still alive to protect it, still fighting, still holding position. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. The chances of a successful rescue improve significantly with an active beacon. And as long as that signal keeps broadcasting, we know exactly where to land our entire force. His jaw set. The Mandarin better run, because Earth is getting Sergeant Frairen back, along with Himmel, Zetran, and those recruits. And we will not stop with the rescue. Rayburn's breath caught. The implication was clear. This planet, this world that had spawned portals and champions and death, humanity was going to make sure the Mandarin regretted every single portal they ever opened. She looked back at the viewport. Somewhere down there on that alien world, Frairen was fighting, surviving, waiting. Hold on, Frairen, Rayburn whispered. We're coming. Down there, in a certain tower room of the Kalikiri Temple, Frairen found herself facing two pieces of news. One very good, one very bad. The good news was that the champion was too bulky. The massive abomination had tried to force its way up the narrow circular staircase and gotten stuck, its grotesque 3-meter frame wedged between purple stone walls. Only its enormous head poked through into the small sanctuary. At the tower's peak, grafted Yorpal arm flailing uselessly, trying to reach them. The thing was trapped, snarling and thrashing, but unable to advance. The bad news was that Sumir had made it past the creature, and her stolen Zumra fronds proved devastatingly effective against the trio. Frairen's world froze. The mental pressure slammed into her skull from all sides, crushing, overwhelming, exactly like the champion had done to them on the station, outside Miss Rimiki's classroom. When they nearly died, her muscles locked, her joints turned to stone. She could hear her heart hammering against her ribs, could feel her lungs screaming for air, but her body refused to obey. All she could do was watch. Zumir laughed. The sound was like breaking glass, high and sharp and wrong. The priestess strode casually between Zetran and Himmel, both of them frozen mid-motion. Zetran's flamethrower hung from his claw, the nozzle still smoking, almost depleted. Himmel's grenade launcher was raised, aimed at Zumir's chest, his finger on the trigger. His slammer hung from his belt, ready but useless. Zumir's clawed finger reached out, almost delicately, and lowered Himmel's weapon. Just touched the barrel with the tip of one finger and pushed it down, casual as anything. Then she did the same to Zetran's flamethrower, her stolen fronds writhing above her head like serpents, her staff glowing orange in the other hand. "Such fierce little warriors," Zumir purred, her red eyes gleaming. "Look at you, so proud, so defiant, so chaotic." Frairen tried to move, tried to raise her rifle, tried to grip her slammer. She was standing near the tower window, further from Zumir than the others, maybe 5 meters of distance. That should have helped, should have given her some resistance, but the pressure in her mind was too much. "You know what I find most amusing," Zumir continued, circling Zetran slowly. She reached out and tapped his hood with one claw, making it flare involuntarily. "You actually believe it. All of you, deep down, somewhere in those simple little minds, you truly believe that human training remade you, that Earth forged you into warriors." Zetran's eyes blazed with rage, but his body remained frozen. "That gravity, that environment, that food." Zumir's voice dripped with contempt as she moved to Himmel now, tilting his chin up with her staff. "You think it changed you, made you stronger, better. You're so proud of your little frames, your little muscles, the scraps of strength you gained under Earth's pull." She turned, gesturing grandly to the champion's head still stuck in the stairway. The thing roared, orange-gray saliva dripping from its grafted jaws. "That is true transformation. That is what awaits those who succeed in Kalikiri's blessing, not your pathetic human gravity training, not your death world exercises." Her smile widened, showing too many teeth. "My God, my planet, true unmaking, true remaking, perfection, through sacred evolution." Frairen's rage burned hot white inside her frozen body. Every word was a knife, every comparison to Earth, every dismissal of what they'd earned, what they'd become. Zumir turned toward her. The priestess began walking slowly, quietly, her mismatched legs clicking against stone, one mandarine, one optican talon, grafted, stolen, wrong. She got closer. Closer, so close that Frairen could smell the burnt flesh where her arm had been seared by Zetran's flames earlier. So close that when Zumir reached out with one clawed hand and touched Frairen's fluffy ear, the Yorpal could feel the cold, dead texture of her skin. Frairen tried to pull the trigger, tried to move, tried to do anything. Nothing. This was a display of power, a show of complete control, and Frairen hated it with every fiber of her being. Zumir's laugh came again, sharper this time. You are the worst of them all, a Yorpal, a pet. Humanity took you in like some stray animal and you rolled over for them, didn't you? Wagged your little tail, let them scratch your ears and feed you treats. The mental pain came next. Frairen's skull felt like it was splitting open. "You got where you are by luck alone," Zumir hissed, her face inches from Frairen's frozen muzzle.
And that same damned luck brought you and your little human pet group to our sacred chamber, where you destroyed months of work, killed several promising champions in the middle of their sacred transformation. The pain intensified. Frairen wanted to scream but couldn't. For that, death is not punishment enough. Zumir's red eyes blazed. No. First, you deserve to suffer, and I know just the right way to make you suffer. Her smile turned predatory. You are not human. You are not immune to mental control. Zumir raised her staff high. Reality dissolved. Suddenly, Frairen was chained to a wall in a place of utter darkness, stone pressed against her back, metal bit into her wrists and ankles. The first direction her thoughts took, defend yourself, this is an illusion, fight it, was plucked out of her mind like a weed and erased. Gone, just gone. Then she heard Rayburn's voice. Save me, Frairen, please, save me. No. The image materialized before her eyes with horrifying clarity. Rayburn's bloodied, naked figure held in the massive clawed hand of an enormous champion. Her dark hair matted with blood, her green eyes wide with terror and pain, her skin torn and broken, ribs visible through gaping wounds. Still alive, still conscious, still suffering. And behind the champion, Zumir appeared, smiling that terrible smile. This is your fault, the priestess whispered. You failed, and now everyone you cared about will suffer for your weakness. Frairen reached a state of true despair, the kind that hollows you out, the kind that makes you want to stop fighting. Because what's the point? What's the point when everyone you love dies because you weren't strong enough, fast enough, good enough? The ground shook beneath her feet. Just for a moment, just one instant, the illusion flickered, dissolved, reality bled through the cracks, and Frairen saw drop pods raining from the sky outside the tower window, hundreds of them, thousands, streaking through the yellow-green atmosphere like falling stars, trailing fire and fury. Humanity had arrived. Zumir's concentration wavered, just a fraction of a second, and in that tiny window of opportunity, Frairen's mind snapped back to reality. She saw Zumir shaking, saw the priestess's red eyes widen in shock as she looked out the window, saw the moment of distraction, and Frairen moved. A primal roar tore from her throat, raw and savage and full of every ounce of rage she'd ever been holding back. Her hands moved faster than her conscious mind could process. Muscle memory, human training, predator instinct, all firing at once. The slammer came up. Time seemed to slow. Frairen saw Zumir's eyes snap back toward her, saw the priestess raise her staff to reassert control, saw the stolen fronds begin to spread. Frairen's thumb hit the activation trigger. The slammer's strike face propelled forward at over 100 miles per hour. Crack! The sound was like a thunderclap in the small tower room. Frairen felt the impact travel up her arm, felt bone and flesh giving way under the powered hammer's brutal force. She aimed for Zumir's shoulder, the side where the priestess held her glowing staff. When both their rationalities returned, when the moment of violence ended and awareness came flooding back, they were staring at each other. Zumir's entire arm was gone, just gone, torn away at the shoulder, the stump bleeding orange-gray blood that sprayed across purple stone. The severed limb lay on the floor 3 meters away, clawed fingers still gripping the staff, the orange glow already fading. The pain hit Zumir a heartbeat later. Her mental attack dropped entirely. The pressure in Frairen's skull vanished like someone had opened a release valve. Suddenly she could breathe again, could move, could think. Zetrin! Himmel's voice screamed across the comms. Empty the flamethrower on the champion, now!
It's already empty!
Zetrin shouted back, but he was moving, bringing the nozzle up anyway, squeezing the trigger. A thin stream of liquid fire sputtered out, the last dregs. It splashed across the champion's face, making the thing roar and thrash, but it wasn't enough. Wouldn't be enough.
The creature was pulling itself free, stone cracking around its massive frame. Zumir tried to stop them. Her remaining hand came up, fronds spreading, trying to rebuild the mental pressure. I am not a human pet. Frairen snarled, stepping forward. The pressure was there, but weaker now, manageable. Frairen pushed through it like walking through deep water. I am the big, bad werewolf. She dropped her slammer and pulled her service knife. And I'm getting rid of those annoying, stolen fronds. Zumir's eyes went wide. No, you can't! Frairen grabbed the first frond. The sensation was nauseating, warm, slick. She could feel it trying to connect with her mind, trying to worm its way in. She ignored it, set the knife's edge against where it had been grafted to Zumir's skull, and cut. The priestess screamed. Frairen cut again and again, each frond severed, falling to the floor like dead serpents. Blood, Zumra blood, wrong color, wrong smell, sprayed across Frairen's armor. She was moving on pure instinct now, pure rage, cutting and tearing with a level of violence that surprised even her. This was what they'd done to people, to her people, to countless victims. She wasn't going to feel guilty about this. The last frond fell. At the same time, Zetrin's scream cut through the chaos.
Flamethrowers dry!
And Himmel's voice, high and manic. I've got something better! Frairen's head whipped around just in time to see Himmel point his grenade launcher directly at the champion's open, roaring mouth. Hey, ugly! Eat this! Thump. The 40mm grenade sailed through the air in a perfect arc and disappeared down the champion's throat. For one frozen moment, everything was silent. Then Himmel dove behind Zetrin. Get down! Get down! Frairen didn't think, she just moved, grabbed Zumir. The priestess was right there in a very bad shape, already on the ground, and yanked her up, using her as a shield as she hit the floor behind the battered Mandarin. The champion exploded from the inside. The sound was indescribable, a wet, meaty boom that shook the entire tower. The creature's head simply came apart, chunks of grafted flesh and crystalline bones spraying across the sanctuary in a horrifying shower. Biological matter rained down on them like a grotesque storm. Most of it splattered across Zumir's back, the priestess taking the brunt of the explosion while Frairen crouched behind her. Silence. Frairen lay there for a moment, breathing hard. Zumir's body pressed against her as an unwilling meat shield. She could feel the priestess's trembling, could hear her gasping in pain and rage, could smell burnt flesh and gunpowder and blood. Slowly, she pushed herself up, shoving Zumir's battered form aside. The priestess collapsed fully now, clutching the stump of her arm, her frondless head pressed against stone. She was still alive, battered, broken, covered in champion viscera, but alive. And she was making threats, weak, gasping threats about how they would pay, how the Kalikiri would punish them, how the assimilators would hunt them down. Frairen ignored her. She turned to look for Himmel and Zetrin, found them taking cover behind an overturned piece of furniture, some kind of altar or prayer bench. Both of them bloodied from head to toe with champion viscera. Their chests were heaving, their eyes were wild. The three of them stared at each other, and then somehow, they started laughing. It wasn't a small laugh. It was full-throated, genuine, borderline hysterical laughter that echoed through the tower's sanctuary. Outside, explosions lit up the sky, human missiles striking targets, drop pods landing. The invasion was in full swing. Did you? Himmel gasped between laughs, pointing at Zumir's gore-covered form. Did you use her as a shield? Seemed appropriate. Frairen shot back, wiping champion blood from her visor.
I was going to suggest we throw her out the window.
Zetrin hissed, but he was laughing too. His hood flaring and flattening rapidly. Another explosion rocked the temple, closer this time. The sound of rotary cannons and missile strikes filled the air. There wasn't a single drop of doubt in any of their heads about who would win now that humanity knew where the Mandarin planet was.
You know,
Himmel said, checking his grenade launcher and finding it completely empty.
I think today might have been tougher than any human training we ever went through.
Even recruit training? Frairen asked, remembering those first brutal weeks on Earth, the cold weather exercises, the gravity, the drill sergeants screaming in their faces.
Even that.
Zetrin agreed, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. He immediately regretted it, based on the disgusted expression.
Though at least Drill Sergeant Marshall never made us fight a champion with our bare hands. She would have if she'd thought of it,
Himmel muttered. Frairen looked at them both, her friends, her battle buddies, bloodied and exhausted and still making jokes even as the world burned around them. Then she looked at Zumir, still gasping threats on the floor, now covered in the remains of her own champion.
Shut up,
Frairen said conversationally to the priestess. The cavalry is here, and trust me, they're a lot scarier than you ever were. Outside, another wave of drop pods screamed past the tower window, and Frairen allowed herself, just for a moment, to believe they might actually survive this. Minutes later on the bridge of the Big Mouth Bass, Specialist Rayburn sat hunched in a corner seat near the aft observation station, trying desperately to stay out of the way. Her knee bounced nervously. Her hands gripped the armrest so tight her knuckles had gone white. Every instinct screamed at her to do something. But what could she do? The war operation was unfolding below. Drop pods had landed. Ground forces were engaging. All she could do was wait and worry. A notification chimed on Captain Shaughnessy's command screen. Rayburn's head snapped up. She watched the captain's eyes scan the display, his expression unreadable as always. Then his hand moved, bringing up what looked like a tactical report. She was moving before she realized it, crossing the bridge in quick strides. Captain.
Specialist, I need you to.
Shaughnessy started, but Rayburn was already pressed up against the side of his command chair, craning her neck to see the screen. Is that Third Company? Did they find them? Are they...
Rayburn.
Shaughnessy's hand came up, physically pushing her back a step. Not rough, but firm.
I need to confirm this with the comms officer on the ground. Give me 30 seconds.
30 seconds felt like 30 years. Shaughnessy opened a channel, his voice crisp and professional.
Ground Command, this is Big Mouth Bass Actual. Confirm status of beacon recovery team. Over.
Static crackled. Then a male voice, breathless and slightly bewildered.
Big Mouth Bass Actual. This is Ground 29er. Beacon team is... Well, the 3 recruits are secure. Found them in the storage room, protecting the beacon like their lives depended on it. Nearly shot our rescue squad when we breached. They're shaken, but alive. Over.
Rayburn's heart lurched. The recruits are alive? What about? Shaughnessy held up a finger, still listening. His expression shifted, eyebrows raising, which for Captain Shaughnessy was the equivalent of shocked belief.
Ground 29er, repeat that last part.
Shaughnessy said slowly.
You found who, where? Yes, sir. Sergeant Frairen and the others were located in the tower sanctuary of what appears to be the main temple structure. They have subdued what intelligence believes is a Mandarin religious leader, priestess class target. She's alive, but, missing body parts. The room tower is...
The voice paused.
Sir, it looks like a slaughterhouse. There's also an exploded champion blocking the stairwell. Preliminary assessment suggests the trio destroyed approximately half the temple level before rescue forces arrived. Over.
Rayburn's mouth fell open. They what? Shaughnessy's lips twitched, almost a smile. Almost.
Understood, Ground 29er. What's their current status? Injuries? Over.
Another pause. Static, then.
They're mobile, sir. Exhausted, covered in various biological matter, but mobile, and,
The ground officer's voice took on a note of amused disbelief.
They're requesting immediate resupply. Over. Medical supplies?
Shaughnessy asked.
Negative, sir. They're requesting pizza and more ammunition. In that order. Over.
Rayburn stared at the captain. The captain stared at the comm display. Then Rayburn started laughing, full genuine laughter that made her double over slightly, one hand pressed to her chest. Relief and exhaustion and pure joy crashed through her all at once. That's Frairen. She gasped between laughs, wiping at her tears. That's absolutely Frairen. Of course she'd want pizza. Of course she does. Captain Shaughness allowed himself the smallest smile. Ground 2-9er informed the sergeant that pizza is inbound with the next supply drop and get them whatever ammunition they need. He paused. And tell her well done. Big mouth bass actual out. Rayburn sank into the nearest chair, still grinning like an idiot. Her favorite Yorpal was alive and asking for pizza after taking down a Mandarin priestess and blowing up a champion. Yeah, that was definitely Frairen. 2 months later, a brown-furred Yorpal named Melon stood in formation alongside hundreds of other recruits on the tarmac at Fort Benning, Georgia. The Earth's sun beat down on his back, not as oppressive as he'd feared, but still uncomfortable. His paws shifted in the military-issue boots they'd given him an hour ago. Around him, recruits of various species waited in neat lines. Yorpal, Point, Carlake, and Opticon, even a few Jinn with their curved masks gleaming in the sunlight. Humanity had invaded the Mandarin homeworld, had destroyed every single temple, had systematically dismantled their portal creation capability. The war wasn't over. There was still Mandarin holdouts on other planets, still pockets of resistance, but the existential threat was gone. And yet, here Melon stood, joining the military anyway.
I heard the legendary trio got promoted again,
a Point recruit said nearby, his orange eyes wide with excitement.
Frairen's a staff sergeant now, Himmel and Zetron too, all in the span of 2 months. That's nothing compared to what Mekia and the others got.
A Carlaken added, her hood flaring slightly.
Those 3 recruits who protected the beacon, they skipped straight past private first class, made specialists immediately. I heard they're being assigned to a 3rd company as combat engineers.
The legends are real.
An Opticon recruit breathed, his avian features bright with admiration.
They actually took down a champion with just slammers and a grenade launcher, and captured a Mandarin priestess alive.
I heard Frairen cut the fronds off her skull with a service knife,
the Point said, lowering his voice like he was sharing a sacred secret.
Just carve them off while the priestess was still conscious.
That can't be true, someone said. Melon listened quietly, his tail swishing once behind him. The stories were impressive, certainly, inspiring even, but they also made this whole endeavor feel slightly surreal. He was joining the military at the start of what looked like peacetime. What would his experience even be like? The Carlaken recruit turned to face him directly.
What about you? Are you prepared to abandon your people, to follow in Frairen's footsteps and become a HFY?
Melon's ears perked up. He shook his head.
The word doesn't carry the same stigma anymore. The elders, they just allow anyone to join Earth these days. It's not considered abandonment. It's just service.
The group stared at him, clearly surprised.
Really?
The Point asked.
I thought the Yorpal Council was still... They changed their stance after the invasion,
Melon explained.
After they saw what happened when humanity knew where the Mandarin homeworld was, after they watched Third Company drop on that planet with the full weight of Earth's military behind them.
He paused, thinking of the broadcasts he'd seen, the footage.
I think the elders realized that fighting humanity's way isn't weakness. It's the path to victory.
A Zumra recruit nearby, Melon hadn't noticed her before, turned and joined their conversation, her 4 eyes gleaming.
It's about the same for my species. The local council of leaders has loosened the non-social agreement clause considerably. Seriously?
The Opticon asked. Seriously? The Zumra confirmed, her fronds swaying gently. There's even talk that relationships with humans might not be forbidden much longer. Miss Rimiki went public about her relationship with Caden, you know, the engineering specialist, and the council didn't censure her, didn't even reprimand her.
That's huge,
the Carlaken said quietly. There's more, the Zumra continued. There's a joint venture being set up, humans and Zamra working together on the Mandarin homeworld, to prevent new portals from being created and to study the Mandarin who are left. Apparently, they still have many secrets we haven't uncovered." She smiled slightly. "The rules about interacting with humans are very loose now, almost non-existent." Melon absorbed that information, his mind turning it over. The galaxy had changed, was still changing. The Mandarin threat had forced the Cinderal Confederation to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, about their military capabilities, about their relationship with humanity. And now he stood here, about to begin training in what might be a very different military than the one Frairen had joined years ago. No desperate war for survival, no existential threat hanging over every deployment, just peacetime service, training, readiness, building something instead of defending against annihilation. His experience would be different from all those legends, different from the stories of Frairen's frozen terror on her first drop, of Himmel's panicked running during the agricultural world mission, of Zetran learning to stand his ground instead of retreating to his capsule. But maybe that was okay. Maybe his generation would be the one that built the peace those legends had fought for. A whistle blew. A human drill sergeant stepped forward, her voice so strong that it made every recruit's spine straighten automatically.
Listen up, recruits! Welcome to Fort Benning. For the next 12 weeks, your life belongs to me.
Melon's ears flattened back instinctively. Beside him, the point recruit swallowed hard. Yeah, maybe his experience would be different. But somehow, Melon suspected the drill sergeants hadn't changed much at all.